Filipo Levi, we've just had an awesome conversation on the Leading Through Challenge show. We talked a bit about resilience, about high performance, and about being adaptable as a leader. What are some of the other topics that we touched on today?
Leading your team through this crisis, and how you communicate, how you treat them, but how you also engage with them, how you make them feel safe and secure.
Filipo Levi, welcome to Leading Through Challenge, mate. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, no worries, Chris. It's awesome to be here.
Filipo, who are you in a nutshell?
Oh, my nutshell.
Yeah, you might use a whole 20 minutes on this one.
I'll keep it short. I mean, I'm I was born in New Zealand, so I'm Samoan New Zealander. Raised in sort of Hamilton when I was young, and then I came to Auckland till I was 10, and then I went to Dunedin. So we sort of went to Dunedin, and I stayed in Dunedin till I was about 28. Got married and went overseas. So pretty much I'm a guy that's experienced a lot of things in terms of in terms of change, and also grabbing opportunities, seeing opportunities and taking them.
Yeah, and what's some of the work that you're doing at the moment?
Okay, so the last year and a bit, or year and a half now, just sort of started my own business and speaking. So, and part of that was a journey in terms of transitioning from rugby, from a rugby player into having my own business. So I had a plan, a 7-year journey, where I thought, okay, that's it. I've had 5 years of being in the private education sector for about 5 years. So I thought, no, I've got to jump with both feet. So now I sort of work with corporates, to the construction companies, with leaders to change mindsets. And I talk specifically on growth mindset in terms of having that attitude to see through challenges, and also seeing a different angle of what's ahead.
Awesome, mate. And what are the aspects of leadership that excite you the most?
Look, the one thing I know I talk about lots is something that's very close to my heart, which is a Samoan saying. So one of the Samoan proverbs, it says, if I just say it slowly for viewers, it's ole ala ile pule, ole tautua. So I'll repeat it again. Ole ala ile pule, ole tautua, which sort of loosely translated means that the pathway to leadership is through service. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the servant leadership I talk about, in terms of how to communicate with people, how to engage with your workers as a manager or a leader or CEO. How do you coach them through things at the moment? Because at the moment we're talking about management, but there's a sort of a slight change to coaching people in terms of getting the best sort of engagement or the production in terms of the work output.
Yeah, and I imagine that from your professional rugby days as well, you were a leader then. A lot of the same skills that you were utilising then, you would also utilise now.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I mean, when I sort of transitioned into the private education space, I sort of wanted to get stuck into the 9 to 5 grind and learn on the go. So a lot of athletes have that sort of attitude, just to get in there in challenges and try to overcome whatever comes your way. So I guess one of those things is using a lot of my rugby sort of experiences, and then sort of how do you use that to help others, and how to use it to serve others. Because I've had over 13 years of playing professional rugby, so I've experienced different leaders, different coaches, to like the likes of Richie McCaw. We played at school together at Tiger Boys, so I know what he's like, and I used to play him when he was at the Crusaders, and they kept beating us. So I won't talk about that. And then from then on, I transitioned into the Manu Samoa team, and then I sort of captained them, and I learned on the sort of leadership in crisis, in terms of how when you play for Samoa, it's very different to playing in New Zealand in terms of the culture, the language, but also how you fit the different sort of personalities in a team. So you had, how do you balance those Samoans who were raised in Australia with those who were raised in New Zealand, which were quite different to those who were born in Samoa and raised in Samoa. So combining that, those different sort of personalities and it was quite difficult, but it was it was fun learning. But it was a good challenge.
Yeah, that's actually quite a fascinating topic, and I think that's probably one that a lot of teams and workplaces do find challenging. Is like, how do we've got kind of a diverse workforce here. Like, how do we bring everyone together to work on a common goal or a common outcome with this diversity of background? Like, what were some of the interesting themes that you found from that experience and from the stuff that you have learned more recently to help pull people together in that way?
It comes down to, I mean, that famous American speaker, John Maxwell, says that everything rises and falls on leadership, and that's universal. So everything does rise and fall on leadership. And at the moment, what we're currently facing in terms of our own COVID-19 challenges is that we're seeing leaders standing up and leaders sort of not doing what they're not supposed to do. So, but also what I take is from my experiences of Samoa and being and keeping the team and leading them is their servant leadership, and a lot of that sort of comes through because you're the leader to lead, but how do you treat people with kindness? That whole thing in terms of kindness, it's very embedded into the Pacific Island culture, being kind to people, being empathetic of others, of different sort of personalities, of different skill sets, and to create a team. So that's a bit of a nutshell.
Yeah, and I think kindness is something that I'm big on as well in terms of leading qualities that a leader should look to develop. Like, this situation is really interesting and it's really fascinating, and it's put a massive amount of pressure on a whole lot of people. And sometimes one of the first things to go is that kindness. And like, if that goes, then our leadership definitely struggles. Like, how can we remind ourselves, or how can we ensure that we are being kind through this time?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We've been, people who, this is something when I talk about, when you're in the room and someone walks in the room and they just, everything just turns dark. With someone coming in the room, and then you have another person that walks in the room and everything just lightens up. So you're going to have different personalities and different people who are forced to be kind. So the whole psychology of being kind is being forced upon us, and as I think as Kiwis, sometimes we don't like that. We want to do our own thing, and I can be stuck in my own ways, and sometimes I'm challenged by my wife. Says, "Oh, you need to look at this angle." Okay, maybe. Okay, maybe not yet. But yeah, I think it's. With kindness, it is something you need to become. It's becoming, becoming kind. To say to be kind, it's very hard for people because we're ingrained in our own habits in terms of how we speak to people, how we interact with others. So for leaders who are out there being told to be kind, it's not natural. But when you talk about the growth mindset, it's not yet kind. So you have sort of strategies to sort of lead them through to have a process to get them to be kind.
Yeah, and I think one of the first things that it starts with is that awareness of, like, how am I operating? Like, was I kind today? Like, was I kind in those situations? And some of them you won't be. Like, some of them hopefully you were. The majority hopefully you were, but some of them, looking back on it at the end of the day, or looking back on it afterwards and just kind of thinking, hey, what could I have done differently in that situation to be more kind? And hopefully next time around, when you're in a similar situation, you can start to apply that stuff. Sometimes you need to kind of go through that process a few times, I'm sure, before things start to stick.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I mean, talking about changing habits. When I had to sort of lead teams, I did things in my own sort of my own way, but I need to really think about a bit broader of what the team wants, but also I need to sort of negotiate with the managers and also with the CEO, and because it's in a team, it's not just the team, it's just the players you're dealing with other things beyond our control. So a lot of it comes down to the way that things are done in different organizations. So, and part of that is the culture. So culture has a lot to do with organizations or leadership, and it's systems as well. So if a culture's always got that, you always know when you go into an organization, you can feel or sense, that the company organization is, there's that sort of, there's a question mark, and it's those touch points, those first touch points of organization when you ring up, when you knock on the door, when you meet people, and that's when you first get the first impression of organization, and and you can look towards the leadership as being the person that's in charge of that. So.
And I know, like, you do a lot of thinking around high performance cultures and how we can have high performance teams operating as well. And that might not be something on everyone's mind just at the moment. It might be more of a how do we survive this time? But like, how can people think about operating in a high performance way through this really challenging period?
Look, I mean, my personality is I'm an extrovert. So,
yeah.
So as an extrovert, I need to be around people and be in big crowds and socialize. So I like going to my local bar. I like going to meetings and meeting people and face-to-face meetings, face-to-face trainings, or a keynote talk. And you have others who are who like their own bubble, who are introverts. So if I compare myself to my wife, it took me about 3-4 years to understand that she was introvert. And the way I understood it was I Googled introvert years ago. Introvert, what's introvert? And then I had a bubble of a person sipping their coffee in the morning. And in their bubble, they're reading the book over coffee. So, and here comes along there's another picture, a cartoon of the husband or partner coming through. And then, and actually trying to talk to the inside of the bubble. And then the person turns around the bubble and gets real frustrated. So what I've learned is that when I see my wife reading her book or reading or having her coffee, she's having her own time to process the day and process what she needs to do. So for me, I like to say, hey, what are you doing? What should we do today? So what I have to learn as a husband is to actually leave her alone, walk away, have my own coffee, and then wait for her to come out of her bubble. And then that's when I can talk. So we talk about personalities. So introverts are lovingness, loving stay out, the lockdown. But for a lot of extroverts, it's a struggle. So and people thrive, working, in their own environment in the home. And some people like to thrive working in the office space where there's others to interact. And that's something I miss, working in the offices when I used to work in schools and the private education space. But now working as my own company that's just sort of, I've got to do most things, and I've got to sort of adapt and adjust to what I do. So now I'm sitting here in her space, her office space. So behind me, it's a picture of her. You can't see it. So I've been sort of kicked out to the other side in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So you've got to adapt. And the last few weeks I've been involved with groups and coaching groups where people are using this as a way to start to pivot their own business in terms of how they speak, because now obviously it's going to be a more remote training or online or virtual talking, so that's something that I'm adapting my sort of business model of how I operate. So I think that's a lot of organizations, a lot of speakers, a lot of trainers and coaches will be going through at the moment, is to try and pivot and to adjust or adapt their own the way they do things. And so you're going to have people going to struggle. You're going to have those who are challenged by it, but something that we need to become better at.
Yeah, and I think, like, from what I'm hearing you say with that as well, is that like the high performance aspect, and when you start to perform better, is when you start to understand the people around you better as well, and how they're working. Like I'm kind of similar. I might not be quite as extroverted as you, but I'm definitely on the extroversion scale. My wife is an introvert as well, so I definitely I definitely understand what you're talking about there with kind of leaving them in the bubble. And like what's one of the challenging things I think for me is that I'm an external processor as well, like as I like to talk things through, and sometimes I don't know what it is that I'm thinking until I've had a chance to talk it through, whereas she'll kind of develop that whole thing in her mind and then be able to articulate it really well, whereas I'll kind of stumble over stuff and eventually find my way to that end point. But the better that you can understand the people around you, I think, and the way that the others within your team work, then the more you're going to be able to get the best out of them. So it's like, I mean, this is kind of topical as well as the Chicago Bulls with
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, with Jordan and Pippen and Rodman and all of those guys, and they're all super different guys that Phil Jackson as a leader had to adopt different approaches to each of the different people. Like he couldn't coach Rodman like he coached MJ because of the way that the way that Rodman responded. So the more that you can kind of deeply understand what makes your team tick, the more you can pull that cool stuff out of them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. We talk about basketball, and I've been loving that series. You look at a lot of the analogies and the sports analogies. And, you look at netball teams, the league teams, to any sort of sport. You can actually see that Michael Jordan. Who was that personality that suits Michael Jordan? Who was the Rodman guy? And I think I'm sort of the Rodman. So yeah. The guy that just a big background when their former coach Laurie Maines, he was a former All Black coach. So when he brought me into the Otago team to start against, I think it's Wellington, and I was about 21, and I was coming against one of the a future All Black lock, and he was actually forgot his name. Oh no, I do know, Dion Waller. Yeah. Dion Waller and Inoki Afiaki. So Wellington in the late 90s and and they still are mid 2000s, and even now, they are known as that team that bullies. They like to bully others, and it's you think of their players, they're really aggressive, physical players. So Laurie started me the game against Wellington. He said, all you want to do is just hustle, just be aggressive, just get in their face, just do what you can do. So, no worries. So he knew what made me tick. So he knew that I like to be physical, to be confrontational. I like to sort of defend my players. Even though I was surrounded by 90% of the All Blacks, it didn't really matter. I was just excited to be there. So going back to the Chicago Bulls, it's fascinating in terms of how you deal with different personalities, and actually one thing I really admired of the coaching of the Bulls is that you're actually, you're allowing the team to have a day off. I think it was just before the 98 Bulls finals, they had a week off. A day off before their finals game, which was the week, in a week's time. And I think Michael Jordan said that if the coach was young, he wouldn't have done that. But so that's why he respected Phil of allowing the players to have a day off, because the stress of a high performing team, they just need that time off to actually, not relax so much as you don't jump the train the next day, which Rodman did, but this was a different context, and I think they, you have managers, coaches who can really look into some of this leadership, and Phil, and also a lot of rugby coaches that I can talk about today.
And like, how would you go about starting to try and understand your team a little bit better?
I think it comes down to relationships. Relationships. How you how you talk to people. How you it's not just everyone has a different way of communicate. Like say, take for example, the last sort of 4 years I've been involved with club rugby. So I'm pretty old school. I like to say, do this. But in terms of your coaching, coaching style, some players would react to that. They wouldn't like that, because the first thing they'll ask is, in their own heads, why? So, and it was challenging when I was coaching these young guys. Let's just look at the Blues. So I was coaching the number 8. Sotutu. He's one of the outstanding players currently. He's one of the form number 8s. He could be a potential All Black. But when I coached him 3 years ago, it was very different. He came straight out of the school into Colts rugby, and then came and made our senior team for Marist. So, and I found him quite aloof. He'll stand back, and so I had to adapt the way I talk to young people. That challenged my coaching, because I guess being coached by old school in Otago, it's do this way, do that way. And I thrive on it. I thrive on leaders who say black and white, do this, do that. Okay, cool, I do it. And then others like the the style of Wayne Smith, the former assistant All Black coach. He's a different way of people with people. He's very analytical. He's an introvert, and he likes to form those close relationships with people. So. It comes down to how you adapt your own way of managing or coaching or forming those relationships with people, and and having the back of your head that everyone's different, and what you could say could upset people, but then you got to learn from that, and sometimes you just got to be that sort of that person in the middle to sort of to form the team, just like Phil Jackson.
Yeah, mate, and I think. As you say, it's kind of about understanding your own strengths and how you communicate best, but also having that openness and that adaptability to change your style based on who it is that you're interacting with, but also probably being able to drop the ego and not judge yourself as well if you don't get it right first time, or if people don't understand the way that you're communicating to them.
It's interesting you said the ego. I won't name the person, but someone very close in the All Blacks coaching system, and this is a few months ago. So, and this person told me that the coaches, coaches have you have different coaches, and how they're perceived by the public could be quite different to how they're perceived by their own teammates or the management of the team. So you have a different leader that's leading, pretty much different in the circle. But in the public view, it's it's quite different. We actually look at it. Okay, they're quite a good coach, but in fact, there's with leadership, it's always going to be it's not going to be a smooth ride for a lot of coaches and a lot of leadership. There's going to be there's going to be fights. There's going to be politics involved. So you got all that in terms of coaching, and I think ego was, my friend Tommy was high on the list of some coaches who see themselves as a person that could really take the team. But I think and that could be part of a lot of organisations. I just read an article last few days ago about how you engage your teams in terms of leadership, and I was really shocked to see some of the latest stats from the Harvard Business Review. I think this month's a magazine that said that out of the 2,500 companies they looked at or studied, but I'm not sure how accurate the study is, but they looked at how they engage teams, and only 40% of leaders or managers ask their team members, "How are you?"
Yeah, I read that article that you wrote, and that statistic stood out for me. I was like, that is probably not a great way to be leading a team. Is not actually checking in and asking them how they're doing.
Yeah, and I think you came back to. I think you spoke about at the moment it's all about being safe, being secure. People want to be in their jobs. At the moment, we're trending upwards. Thousands of jobs have been, sort of increasing. That the curve is going the other way in terms of flattening the curve. So people want to feel safe, to feel secure at the moment. So that's the main sort of things that people want to feel themselves as a person, and how they fit in the wider team of things, and how they can support their families in this time of crisis.
Yeah, and I think as leaders we have an important role in terms of helping people feel safe as well. Is that asking that "how are you" question is a really important one to check in with your team, but actually then as a leader being prepared to do something about the answer that you get as well. Like if someone says that they're not okay, do you just say, oh, sweet, I've checked that box. I've said, how are you? Like, nah, you can't do that. You've got to go and actually follow up on that action and help people feel safe, because like all of the literature shows that if people don't feel safe, then they're not going, their problem solving goes down, their creativity goes down, their productivity goes down as well. Like even if we just think about it purely from a working capacity, like that stuff is massive to lose. But then also that's how they're showing up for their families and for their loved ones as well, is that they can't problem solve some of the problems that they need to sort out at home or in their communities. And if they can't do that, then they feel even less safe, and it turns into a bit of a spiral as well. So like asking that question, but then being prepared to follow up with some action about making people feel more safe too.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to communication, but also with communication, it comes to listening, actually listening. So I mentioned this in a lot of my talks. I talk about speak once and listen twice.
Yeah.
So you got one mouth, you got two ears.
Yeah, I like that, mate. Filippo, what's influenced your thoughts about leadership the most in the last couple of years?
Well, again, that comes down to how I was raised by my parents. I think my parents are very, my sort of heroes or role models. So as my parents, they had different ways of talking to me. So my dad's an introvert. I've just, Dad loves to read the books and stay in his room and not come out. And where's my mum is an extrovert. She's more me. She loves to be in the open. She likes to socialize and be the person in the middle of a party to cause fuss, and to have fun. So I think using them as my own thinking and my thought process in terms of leadership, that's how I I sort of draw out a lot of strengths, to learn from, and also help with my own weaknesses. How can you better to engage people? How can I, communicate more effectively? Because I guess my mum was my first coach in speaking. So my first time I spoke in front of hundreds of people was at church. So in the Samoan culture, we have something called White Sunday, which is celebrated every sort of end of the year, which celebrates the celebration of children. So children in Samoa. So it came, and there's different stories of how it came about. But my mum told me it came out many years ago after the Spanish flu in Samoa. So in 1918, so when the boat from New Zealand came, the Talone boat came to Samoa, it infected, created a huge pandemic in Samoa, which pretty much, the fatality rate was over 20% of the population. So from that on, a lot of people were lost, a lot of the elders were lost. So out of that, they had to look at something to have hope for, and the hope was our children, the children of Samoa. So now we celebrate it many years later. We celebrate children and also, get them to celebrate the culture and also speaking the language, Samoan language, and learning verses of Bible verses, which sometimes I just didn't know how I did it when I was 6, 7 years old. So I guess my first, so when I was 6 or 7 years old, that's when I started practice to speak in front of people, and I was nervous. I was stuttering, and I was sweating. I can still, go back now. I mean, think about it now, and those experiences, it's just brings back a lot of fun, because I knew if I did really well, then there's always ice cream.
Yeah.
So there's always a reward.
Oh, nice, and that's super powerful. Actually, that stuff is taking it back to your parents and kind of filtering how you think about leadership through them. That's really cool, man. This is a show about trying to get better at being leaders, especially being leaders through adversity. But is there a time that you haven't led well, or that you think that you've led badly? And if so, are you happy to share it?
Okay, I'll share one. I guess it came down to So I was this is 2008. So 2008 season, I was the captain of Samoa. So we finished our last game against Japan, and we won. And then we went to, and then we flew, and I flew back to Japan that year in 2008. And then, and as you know, in rugby, they have different seasons. So you have the seven sort of tests, or seven hemisphere tests, which are all in sort of that July period, which is for the northern hemisphere, which is summer. So our season was in July, and then from July to November there was a big break. So I was in Japan, and I waited, and I started my second season with Rico in Tokyo, and I got a phone call around late November. Beginning of September, to say that I need to fly back to New Zealand to play a test match. And I asked the manager who we play. We're playing the All Blacks. And I asked him, who are we playing? The All Blacks. So for a minute there, I thought, how are we going to face the All Blacks with knowing that the players were not available to play? So the players I'm talking about are the professional players. So 90% of our professional players were not available to play the game against the All Blacks. So I had to make a decision to, do I lead the team or just let them, play the All Blacks, without the captain. So I spoke to my wife. She said, "You need to go," and thought about it. Okay, I'll go. So the next few days, I went to Auckland, and we prepared the team. So we had like a week to form a team to face the All Blacks, and the All Blacks just played the Springboks probably 2 weeks prior, and I think they put 30, 40 points on the Springboks, who were the reigning champions, the World Cup champions from 2007, and the Springboks scored 0. So about 30, 40 nil. I'm not sure what the score were, the exact details, but all I know was the Springboks scored 0. So here we have a team, a bunch of guys just joined from everywhere, from club rugby, from Samoa villages to, just taking anyone who's Samoan who could play rugby. So put the team together, and then we didn't have really much of a game plan. In fact, no, we sort of had a simple game plan, which is to spin the ball wide, because many of our players were sevens players. So a lot of the Samoan players in our team from Samoa were sevens players, and our sevens team were, they actually won the World Cup the year before. So we had guys who won world titles, but sevens and 15s are quite different. So we tried to play that sevens game against the All Blacks. So anyway, at the end, I won't tell you what the score was, but look, we lost quite heavily, and I thought I failed, and I guess I had sort of two speeches to prepare to either either a speech, winning speech or losing speech. So I had to front the media and apologise to the country that we didn't do our best, but we tried to give it all. So in terms of leadership, I think I sort of failed, but I guess a lot of things failed. The whole system, of actually getting us to play a game where none of our players were available at the time, and I guess it comes down probably to what was happening further up, in terms of the whole what was happening between New Zealand Rugby and Samoa. What was why were they trying to push this game, knowing full well that our players weren't available? So I guess there's always something for Samoa Rugby, but I won't say it on here. But I can just say it had a massive impact on my leadership in terms of how do you lead in crisis of having none of your team available? How do you front one of the best teams in the world? So yeah.
Yeah, man, this got to be a tough experience, regardless. Filipo, what should leaders be doing right now? What should they be focusing on?
I think it's quite important. We obviously know that what they need to concentrate on is the well-being of their workers. At the moment, they're looking for safe jobs and safe positions, and a lot of leaders are having to make the call to either, to cut staff or to take pay cuts, or let a lot of their staff go. A lot of really good staff, who will be loyal to the company or organisation. So I guess it's a tough one at the moment in terms of crisis, and I guess it's how do you support them if they're being let go? How do you support them in their transition? How do you support them to maybe look at another role at another organisation? So what's HR doing? How can they fit into the picture in terms of helping their colleagues who are being let go? So, but also for leaders have to make the right decision for the long term. Sort of long-term sort of impact of the organisation in terms of how can we take a massive cut now. Sky City is taking a massive, they've let a lot of people go, but they need to look at the long-term strategy of their organisation. They need to last for not just 6 months, they need to last 5, 10, 20 years down the track. So a lot of organisations are making those tough calls, but they need to do it from the point of view, from the big picture point of view, or in terms of getting people through or getting the organisation through. So but it does start with people. How do you treat them kindly? How do you be empathetic in terms of they're safe, being safe and secure, and their well-being, and their families. So it's a tough one. So and it's a balance. A lot of leaders are going right this minute.
Filipo Levi, thanks so much for joining me today, mate. It's been good fun.
Nice, Chris. It's awesome to chat to you, and we'll catch up soon.